Welcome to the Behavioral View, presented by CentralReach. Join hosts, Dr. Shannon Hill and Dr. Nissa Van Etten, as they explore cutting-edge topics in behavior analysis with expert guests. Stay informed, stay inspired. This is the Behavioral View.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Behavioral View. This is episode 5.3, and I'm Shannon Hill. I am the editor-in-chief here at CentralReach. I am here with my constant companion, Nissa.
Hi, everyone. Nissa Van Etten. I'm the Director of Clinical Training and CR Institute here at CentralReach.
And our regular listeners know that we are really working to make sure that you guys get to meet a lot of the clinicians who work at CentralReach. So today we have Allison. Allison, you want to say hi and talk a little bit about your background as a behavior analyst and what you do now?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Allison Mullengarden. I'm currently a customer success lead here at CentralReach. I've been with CentralReach a little over 3 years, but I am a BCBA. So prior to working at CentralReach, I was working in the clinical field for several years. And now I'm here really helping my customers use CentralReach to the best of their ability to give time back to their clinicians and to their staff daily. So, yeah.
Awesome. And at the beginning of each year when we're doing our planning, we kind of reach out to our team and say, hey, who's out there doing some great work that we want to bring in and share with our listeners and viewers, for those of you watching on YouTube. And Allison recommended today's guests. So guests for today, would you like to begin? Maybe Olivia, you want to say hi?
Sure. My name's Olivia Banks. I am the Associate Clinical Director at the Place for Children with Autism here in Chicago, Illinois. And I'm a behavior analyst as well. And I know Allison because we went to graduate school together.
Oh, such a small field. And then Jessica.
Yes, I am Jessica Gruber. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at the Place for Children with Autism. I'm also a BCBA. I've been in this field for about 15 years. Been working with Olivia for
over 5
6 years. Yeah. And I've actually met Allison in person too. So, yeah.
Great. And, CR Unite this year is going to be in Chicago.
We know that.
We know.
Maybe we'll all have an in-person get-together then.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys kind of chose dream vacations as our question of the day. What did you guys have in mind for a dream vacation?
You want me to go? You want to go?
Sure. I picked the question. I didn't even think of it ahead of time either. So I'm totally going off the cuff, but I think I would choose Italy. Olivia's actually gone the past couple summers and told me a lot about where she's gone, and I've never been. So I think that would probably be my number one choice, is to travel around Italy for a couple weeks.
It's such a good one.
That was going to be my exact answer. Jess was like, well, Olivia makes Italy look really fun. So yes. I want to do exactly what she's been doing. And especially it's like so cold here in New Jersey. I'm like, anywhere warm sounds like my dream vacation.
Yes. Italy's such a good time. I like to travel a lot. So I thought about this. I'm like, ask me in a week, I'll probably have a different answer. But right now, I really want to go to Japan. I'd love to do like a Tokyo trip, go out into, Al's been to Japan before. And it sounds really cool. I'm a big foodie. I like all my vacations are based around what good food I can eat. So
yep,
that's my answer today.
Totally with you on that. How about you, Nissa?
Gosh, I'm going to jump on the Italy train. I've been wanting to go forever, and I don't follow you, Olivia, socially, and now I want to, so I can explore your Italian coast. We also have an office in Italy here at CentralReach, and I've been trying to get us sent over there sometime.
That's a good point, Nissa. How do we make that happen?
Well, I'm just going to wind this up in the way that it should be, apparently, because I am going to Italy next year.
Wow.
This is a birthday gift to myself. I'm having one of those birthdays that might make you sad. So to celebrate, I decided that I was going to spend the month of May in Italy next year. Have a little Airbnb as my home base and do day trips from there. And I'm telling all of my friends, if you want to come, book your flight, tell me what days, I'll save you a bedroom. And now I know that I need to follow Olivia to know where to
all the time. Those will be in the show notes.
Yes, right. Italy.
We can send you a whole itinerary. It's a whole thing.
Please.
awesome.
This was definitely meant to be. So
Where in Italy? Where's the Airbnb? Just curious.
I haven't booked it yet because it's too far out still, but I'm looking, Tuscany.
Nice.
Yes,
I think
Florence.
pretty much go. Yeah.
Yes.
Florence is sounding good too.
So exciting.
Yep. All right. So let's kind of launch in. The reason that you guys were nominated to come and share your ideas with us is that you've created this quality framework. So tell us a little bit about that. What exactly is it and why did you do it?
I'm going to let Olivia kick us off because this really is something that she found and brought to our leadership team. And then we all took it together and ran with it. So you can go ahead and introduce her. Yeah.
So we have been talking about quality assurance at our organization since its inception. But what we hadn't developed yet a couple of years ago was how to take our quality assurance data and kind of put it in aggregate and make more informed decisions about what we were doing in terms of like the group performance based on those different tools that we have in place. So I can't remember. I was probably scrolling like Twitter or some sort of social media, and I saw some other behavior analyst post this article about how to, like, it was a theoretical article about how to create a quality assurance framework for your business as an ABA professional. And I read it, and then I read it again, and then I read it again, and I brought it to work probably the next day. And like, if you can picture me, I'm like running down the hallway. I'm like, Jess, I've read this article, like, you got to read it. And I put together a bunch of stuff and was like, okay, we got to sit down with all of our clinical leadership team. This is the coolest thing. Like, we could do this. And it wasn't an application. It was a theory. And the article is written by Bryant Silbaugh and Robbie Al Fatal in, I think it's 2021. And it's creating a quality framework for your organization and kind of how to build it from the ground up. And the excellent thing is the process is kind of outlined in the article. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And fortunately, we had done some of those steps. We had the beginnings of some quality assurance going on at our organization, not quite the way we do it today, but things that are incorporated into the system we use today. We had KPI, key performance indicator data that we were collecting, but there was some development we wanted to do with it, with clinical outcome data. And so it kind of walks you through the steps of how to go from point A to point B and creating the system. And it's all based in organizational behavior management. And we followed it kind of like a roadmap from beginning to end. And it was really fun. And I'm sure we'll get into more detail on like how the framework works, but that's where it came from, was trying to create a system that could give us quantifiable data that could tell us how our service delivery was actually going and how successful it was and what are our standards. What do we believe as an organization are the important quality markers for our services? So anything to add, Jess?
No, that was awesome. I do remember as soon as I read the article, I texted you that night. I was like, wait, this is really cool. Like, this is amazing. Like, we fell in love with it and probably read it, like you said, 3, 4, 5 times and then got everyone else to read it. And yeah, we've implemented it exactly as written. We really have.
Wow. We had Robbie on the show. I think it was maybe season 3, I can't remember. But we'll definitely link the article for people who want to dive into that, and a link to that episode too if you want to hear directly from him as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So you went looking, you found the great roadmap. How did it work when you put it into place in your organization? Were you able to take it and it was perfect as is? Did you make any tweaks?
So it's kind of a high level framework. So it kind of gives you like the basic steps to go through, but there's a lot of like work that goes into each step. So one of those is reviewing your internal standards of quality that you already have in place, like Olivia mentioned. What key performance indicators you have, how you're measuring treatment fidelity, targets mastered, things like that.
Another part of it is to use outside resources for evaluation. So we were already accredited through the BHCOE, now known as JADE. So we have their guidelines in place. We used the CASP guidelines. We reviewed the Sunberg program evaluation. What are some other ones we use? BACB guidelines. So kind of taking all of those external resources and reviewing those guidelines as well. And then like one of the main takeaways of the article is that you can't just rely on those outside resources to call yourself quality, because they can't possibly understand all the different variables that impact your organization. So specifically for us, we focus on comprehensive treatment for early intervention clients. So we have a lot of different variables that aren't necessarily represented through those outside resources that we had to add into our quality framework. So from there, we took what we had already internally, what exists externally, pushed it together, and then we created what we're calling our service delivery framework. And we created an internal assessment with all the different areas that we wanted to assess our organization on from a clinical quality perspective. So everything from treatment fidelity to titration and discharge to ensuring that treatment plans are written appropriately, utilizing evidence-based assessments, and that they're actually implemented as written. So all of these different aspects, Olivia could probably give you more detail on the other areas of it. So we use all of those resources to create this assessment. And then from there, we had to train our team on how to implement the assessment. And then we had to create kind of that framework of that OBM process of implementing the assessment, analyzing the data, coming up with an intervention to determine what are we going to do with that data, how are we going to make improvements, and that just continue that cycle over and over and over to improve quality. And I think we're on year three. Yeah, 2 or 3 of implementing it. And we've seen significant improvement in several areas. Other areas we've seen stay a little stagnant because maybe we haven't necessarily done an intervention in that single area yet. But we are, every single quarter, we're making improvements to the process.
For listeners in particular, just knowing, I work in clinical practice, I actually work with Robbie Fatal in particular. So one of the things I'm sure they'll be wondering is, how do we set this up for our organization, right? That's why a lot of our listeners listen in, is we want to follow this method. But my question is more of, how do your behavior analysts get behind it? Are they super excited, especially at the onset? Were they overwhelmed? Like, oh my gosh, this is more work. How are they all participating, and what's that process look like for them?
That's a great question. I think the answer varies on how the BCBAs feel about it. We have like 55 behavior analysts or something like that these days. So it varies how long they've been with us, how involved they are in the process or exposure to it, on how much they understand what's going on. They know we have a quality assurance program that's pretty large, that we repeat it often. But the way that the system works is we have the assessment, right? We complete an assessment, quasi-randomized across a ton of different clients and cases. And then that those data get aggregated, and then we use that data to make a decision. So the assessors are highly involved. And that is, I think we're at 12, assessors. I'm pulling a number out of my head right now. Some of them do more than one assessment in a quarter. Some of them just do one. So if you're an involved assessor, which is usually a tenured behavior analyst, usually a tenured clinical leader, but they might be like a center director level leader. They might be at the regional director level. They might be on, working with me or Jess at the director or executive level. It depends on how much they have been involved in the process, on how jazzed they are about getting the data. We review the data with our team after every quarter to talk about why we are making the decisions we're making. So one of the hardest parts about all of this is that it's split out data. So we have an entire assessment score, but then you have scores on, the smaller pieces that come together to make the big. So like Jess talked about, assessment or behavior reduction or whatever. You can't possibly intervene on everything all at once, or you won't get any movement. So that's one of our most difficult pieces. But the most important one is that there is focus. So we get the data after we complete the assessment cycle and pick one area, usually, sometimes even one test item in an area to intervene on, and then measure whether or not that intervention is successful. And so when we bring that to the group at large, our BCBAs in our centers, we try to give them a full background on, okay, we didn't just kind of pull this out of the hat. This is data that supports that this is an area we need to improve upon. So I think that's probably the majority of their exposure, aside from there's a therapy recording that we do as part of it. So it's not just what's on paper in terms of quality, but it is just as much what does service delivery actually look like when the technicians are working with a client. So they get pretty involved with that part because they have to set up a camera and they have to record it and upload it to a video folder and all of that jazz. So I think our clinical leaders who are involved in assessment or are really excited about this kind of OBM framework, which is a good chunk of them, they get very excited. Like I just went through training with a couple of them recently, and that's just so cool. I know. I wish that I could do this all the time. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's cool, right?
Well, I was just going to ask, what do you do? I would imagine that it might be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Anxiety provoking, maybe for that technician who's being recorded. How do you prepare them for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to take that one, Jess?
Sure. We try to go into it trying to reassure them that the goal here is not necessarily to evaluate them individually, but it's the organization as a whole. And that we're really looking at how well have we prepared you for session, not how well are you doing. We really see it as behavior analytically. What environment did we create for you to be successful? And if you aren't successful, not that we would use that language, it's on us. It's on us to retrain you. It's on us to make your job easier. And of course, there's going to be some level of reactivity because there's not usually a camera in your face during session. But for the most part, I do think they kind of acclimate to it being there because it's on an iPad. They are used to iPads being around during session. It's not that there's an assessor on the other side of the screen looking at them. It's a recording. So they do kind of just eventually, probably after the first couple of minutes, get used to it being there. So we try to lay it out that way. Of course, there probably is some level of anxiousness that comes along with it, but we really try to let them know our goal is improvement of quality across the board.
Yeah. And there's no the assessment score and how well service delivery is scored in the therapy observation doesn't go back to the technician who is running session, which I know is a weird thing we might want to dig into, but we're not emailing them back a score from a fidelity checklist, right? Because we really are using those data as a measurement of how well we created an environment to produce certain behaviors rather than here's your quality assurance score, So
I think that's got to be a big piece of people's comfort with that then.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about this in the pre-interview, but I don't know why it didn't hit me then. So I'm going to ask this question, and if it doesn't go well, we can always edit it out. Sounds like a lot of data analysis. How are you doing your data analysis? And the second part I'm going to tag on to that is I'm wondering if there's AI tools that are about to make that a lot easier for you guys.
This is a great question. I work through the data analysis on the aggregate scale before we bring it back to our team usually. But all of the assessors, when they are completing the assessment, they're scoring in an Excel spreadsheet that auto scores for them. So they're really just working, what is the level of standard that was met? How well was it met? And they're using a rating scale that's behaviorally anchored for each test item. So other than actually going through and assessing each item, the scoring part for the assessor is not super heavy. They don't have to do math, etc. But the analysis of the data, once it's actually entered, it's put into the score sheet, it's graphed, all of that. The assessment of the trend is manual with us clinical clinicians. We're looking at the trend, we're looking at a difference between, where was the score the last quarter or the quarter before. We're using some trend lines, things like that. But it would be very cool to see how AI would be able to incorporate it into the system. I'll say that.
Well, my follow-up is any of that data coming from CentralReach? Are you looking at some of that treatment fidelity within CentralReach, how it's being captured in clinical?
Yeah. Insights. We love insights.
I love that.
I'm a real big fan of insights. So
Allison, because we talk about it quite often. It is one of the most impactful products we use in terms of, or parts of our product that we use in terms of our management of our business, because it's an aggregate of all of the data that's going into CentralReach. We use all of the pre-made ones. We have tons of custom reports, and they are connected to many, many aspects of our assessment. So
we try really to be conscientious about making sure that our CEUs are not sales demos or anything. I mean, but this matters. So I do want to throw that out to Allison for just a second to say, can you tell people who don't know what Insights is, what that is?
Yeah, sure. That's our advanced business intelligence tool within CentralReach that we put a lot of resources into. So there's tons and tons of pre-built dashboards that takes all your data within CentralReach. And so things like RBT supervision, clinical outcome scores, we're always releasing new dashboards constantly. So things like operational financial reports, things like that, but then even like clinical, like I said, the RBT supervision is a big one, things like this. And then you can also build custom dashboards if you add on a designer license. So I don't know if you guys have built your custom reports around this, or are you using some of those pre-built dashboards? But lots of great data.
And I think, Shannon, to your point, not talking about the product in particular, I think more for the clinicians overseeing an org, we aren't trained in how to collect this type of OBM type data. Where do we aggregate everything that, we might know how data are captured per client and what we're looking for outcomes. But that's something I know I've struggled with in my own clinical careers. I've got access to all this data, but how do I aggregate it? Do I need a connector like Tableau, or, do I need an Excel master on my staff to start to put this all together, to pull the pivot tables, to move it even in that direction? So those are all things that, I've taken extra courses on Excel in my previous life to just say, okay, I'm going to figure this out manually.
Yeah. And as soon as you take class, figure it out, they change Excel.
Change it.
Yeah. I would say, like, a piece of advice that has helped us at times, like we were talking about, focus on what area we intervene on. When you start to collect data on quality assurance, whether it's an outcome of an assessment like ASDQ, or it's regular week over week or month over month data, start small and pick out the thing that's the most impactful. Like talking about clinical outcomes, we've used some of the dashboards and insights to look at clinical learner progress, like goals mastered, targets mastered in a certain time frame. Sometimes we pull them apart by location, or we have regions within our organization as well. And we use those as part of our regular performance management, right? Like we have goals tied to those. We have reinforcers tied to those things. And then also on the large scale, those outcomes are connected to our ASDQ assessment too. So you start small and just like one or two items. You can always add more to it. Make a system that you contact your own reinforcement, right? It doesn't become overwhelming. You don't have to be an Excel expert, And
it has evolved. Over our assessment itself has evolved over the years. Part of our documented process is that annually we'll review all of the different standards that we've created and determine, okay, do we need to take any off? Do we need to add any more? How do we want to continue to push ourselves to improve quality, where maybe 2 years ago we couldn't have done it because we didn't have the resources, whether it's time or people or systems to do that. And each year it's gotten more and more advanced, and we're able to measure more standards across the board. So it's a really well thought out and defined process. And Olivia has been a big part of designing that. Well, let me pause for just a second and give a secret word for our CEU seekers. And this one has no rhyme or reason. Vogue, VOGUE. Well, there was a rhyme and reason. It was, I was thinking framework, frame, Vogue. Remember Donna. Okay. So curiously, like you guys had mentioned that you're using the term we quite a bit. When you get your data compiled and you're making the determinations of what you're going to intervene on, what your priorities are, is that a quarterly process, an annual process, and who is involved in making those determinations?
So we complete the assessments quarterly. So it's a whole batch of assessments in a quarter. We break up the assessment to have different due dates by parts. So you wait till the very end. And then aggregate the data in the first week or two of the new quarter. And then the we that gets together to analyze the data and then make some decisions about it is our clinical leadership team. So any other associate clinical directors, our regional clinical supervisors as well, all BCBAs. And we on a simple level, it's our lowest scoring area that has the most impact on the learners. So, for example, behavior reduction, which is all about behavior intervention plans and their efficacy, that's going to have a really big impact on the learner, right? It's also going to have a big impact on our technicians' happiness in the workplace, which also impacts the learner. So that was an area that we scored lower in sometime last year. And even if we had one that was maybe equally as low, but wasn't as impactful, we would have chosen, which we did. We chose behavior reduction as our intervention area. So like that happens quarterly by our leadership team. And then we bring that, cascade it down to all of our leaders to get their impact and their feedback on what's going on and pick an intervention. Usually we pick an intervention that we think is going to work, but we talk to our leaders at the next rung to say like, is this something you think is going to work? Is this the way that we should go about this and work on implementation? So quarterly, and then we also look at annual scores just for fun. I will also say, since we're talking about data, that's just our assessment. We take quality assurance data on other like smaller pinpoints related to our assessment. So they kind of work together. That's on a week over week and monthly basis as well.
Is there someone, and maybe it's you, Olivia, I don't know, is there someone whose job it is to be just looking at all these data points all the time? Or are you doing that as rolled into other job responsibilities?
It's rolled into other job responsibilities, certainly part of my role as well. And Jess looks at them quite often too. But any of our clinical leaders, they are looking at their team performance. So whether they're a BCBA holding a caseload, they're just looking at their own quality assurance data on their caseload. The center director level, regional, or myself, we're all looking at it from a different kind of like team performance perspective. So, and that's, like I said, weekly. BCBAs are probably looking at their caseload stuff daily. And then, we look at them in aggregate in the month as well at the end of the month. It's rolled into our jobs.
Yeah. One thing that Olivia built is each clinician has an individual insights report that has different individual pinpoints on there for their performance and their caseload that feeds into the larger quality assurance system. Mm-hmm. They are on those things every single day. It's like that's the cool. First thing they open up because it can impact their day to say, okay, this kiddo is below 10%. So I need to prioritize seeing this kiddo before I see this other kid who may be at 20% already for the month, for example. So that has made a huge difference in them understanding where their performance lies using the insights report.
And does that give them more control over their performance? Kind of like, oh, I see that I'm trending in this direction. I can kind of shift my own metrics and meet the criteria. What happens if one particular, I don't know if you've got regional directors that might see multiple clinics or multiple sites. One area is not performing well. Would that director go in and support more? What's that intervention look like if data are trending in the wrong direction?
Yeah, good question. The AS2Q assessment is, we think about it like the kind of overarching idea is that your assessment is like the thermometer that's going to tell you what your temperature is. And then everything else we do on a weekly and monthly basis is like our intervention. That's like your Tylenol if it's going to mess with like your fever or something like that. And so they are monitoring, coaching, supporting performance at especially at the regional level, individually based on whatever team it is, whether it's center by center or an individual performer, whether it's PCBA or clinic director. So they're looking at that regularly. They probably identify it before it becomes
a problem,
so to say. And they're taking action as soon as they kind of see it start to trend in the other direction with the goal of teaching that individual performer to do what they're doing. Like, and you see the trend moving before it happens. So when the assessment is done, it's just a measurement of how well those interventions worked, rather than like they do the assessment and they go, oh my God, the scores out of my region are not as good. Like they already know all of that because they're tracking it on a week over week and monthly basis. So there's not a whole lot of
it gets there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because we don't want that super long delay. Because so much can happen between, January 1st and April 1st.
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of a question that I had too, is what kinds of things, like, have you had any situations over 3 years where something was just going along really well and then suddenly something happened and it decline, I wonder if you've been able to kind of see what kind of variables can lead into that. And I don't know how many times I said kind of in that. But
Well, one thing as part of our our process for, I just said kind of, as part of our process for evaluation is we will sometimes add new pinpoints or clarify them or make them more stringent, which does impact our score. So sometimes we can anticipate that the score might decrease, but it's for a reason. Like most recently, I think we ended up breaking down one pinpoint into maybe 3 different pinpoints because we determined that it wasn't sensitive enough to catch like the individual changes that needed to happen. So it will potentially bring down our score for this most recent quarter. So sometimes we can anticipate it, sometimes we can't. I kind of forgot the original question now, where I went with that.
variables that predict that things are going to go in the wrong direction. Yeah.
I definitely feel like variables like if we get assessments out of, let's say we've opened a brand new center. So our BCBAs are newer to the organization. Usually when that happens, clients are usually newer to services. Maybe people are not as fluent with what our standards are. We do an assessment out of there. It's sometimes you can kind of, if you're the assessor especially, pick up that case. You have an idea about, okay, this could be a situation where that could be a variable that impacts like newness to our standards essentially. Or honestly, a lot of times if we do see something drop, even if it's an individual standard within a big area, I think our biggest walk away is like, we've got to go investigate because it's not all the same.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not all the same across, more often than not, it's not all the same across all centers or all BCBAs. We find a variety of maybe functionally equivalent barriers, but barriers that we've got to go address and try to, this is the joy of OBM, right? You've got to pick an intervention for a whole lot of people. And there's going to be some people that impacts positively, some people who need individual plans beyond that.
One of my favorite things as a person who's been like training director in lots of different ways, has been the OBM approach to identifying whether what you have here is a training deficit, a knowledge deficit, a behavioral deficit, or an environmental barrier. Have you guys looked at that yet? Do you have any feedback on how many of your interventions have been related to training versus changing some sort of environmental barriers that have been there, or just motivating people?
I think it's all of the above. I think training seems to be our number one intervention, but I also think, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know if that's true, because we also have changed like the formatting of different things to make their jobs easier. So for example, we identified behavior interventions as our last intervention for, I think it was Q3 or Q4. And in that process, we revamped the whole BIP system for how you create a BIP to make it easier on the clinician to write a BIP, in hoping that simplifying the process would result in better implementation and fidelity of the treatment plan. So I think it's actually probably a healthy balance of training and then changing the environment or the materials that they're using. Motivation, I think we have a pretty solid motivation system in place. We use a scorecard system for our clinicians that we've seen huge improvements in performance since we've implemented that as well. So motivation, I'd say, is probably not our number one intervention. I don't know if you agree with that, Olivia.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I don't think these days, I don't think motivation is our biggest barrier, although we always want to dig into it and find out.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have leaned on the PDCHS, Performance Diagnostic Checklist, the human services version, a handful of times to try to go into an environment when we're really stumped and maybe across a couple of individual performers and say like, what is really getting in the way of people getting this done? And that's where we lean heavily on our regional directors, our center directors to get us the right information. Or like sometimes I'll go myself and just go Gemba walk. I'm going to see what's going on. What's in the way? How can we make this better? Because the overarching theme here is we've created an environment that is or is not reinforcing the behavior we want. And so what has to change about it?
I want to give you both a hug. Yeah. This is so amazing. Allison, I'm kind of, I feel like I know, or I'm picking up the vibe here, but what did you see as a CSL that just made you think, oh, these people need to know what these guys are doing?
Yes, thank you for asking, because I was like trying to get an opening or trying to figure out how to segue into this. But no, this is cool. Obviously, I mean, Olivia is my good friend, so I'm not surprised by all of this amazing work that she's doing, along with Jess and everyone at the place. But as a CSL, I mean, I've been here for like 3.5 years, so I've worked with like hundreds of organizations, and I find so many of them are really looking at their internal like quality standards and how to measure it and things like that. And they'll come to me and ask like, how do I aggregate this data? How do I get this data? How do we like implement these strategies? And I can only, go so far as to tell them what they can do within um, CentralReach. But then I always just think of what like you guys are doing. And I'm like, this needs to be told to the world, that you're so willing to look internally and say like, is this an issue that, with our training standards, is this an issue with this? And then part of my job is really just like, mainly is to make sure people are using CentralReach in a way that like help, them grow their business and make lives easier and things like that. So, the fact that you're also like looking at like, how can we make it easier to write a BIP? I mean, exactly, like that is like game changer. If you can write one quickly, like that's what I talk to people about all the time with treatment plans within CentralReach and stuff. Like, how do you just get to a point where you just click a few buttons and just, reduces that effort? So yeah, it's all just really cool.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Let me do another secret word. Matter. MATTER was my second secret word. This all makes a huge difference. And curious about you've alluded to it just a little bit with improvement in certain staff characteristics. How's your culture changed overall since making this shift?
That's a good question. I have a good response for that one. So we did a survey probably about 3 months ago, and it was for our clinicians. And we said, why do you choose the place? And we gave them a bunch of different options to choose from, and then also just an open box free form as well. And the number one response across our BCBAs was clinical quality, that we focus on clinical quality. And I think that's something we've made a name for ourselves, that by no means do we think we are perfect or the best. But we do know that we put all of our efforts towards continuous improvement. It's one of our values within the organization, and we are going to always continue to try and do better when it comes to clinical quality. And I think that has become part of our culture for all of our clinicians. One thing I think we have area of opportunity is to continue to bring all of our RBTs into what we're doing with ASDQ, because it is a lot of data, like we were saying. But one of our goals this year is to make sure we're putting more of that data in front of them, whether it be in meetings or via email or monthly staff meetings, showing them like how their work is impacting clinical quality across the organization. So I think we have seen a change in culture where it's just a known, you come to the place because we care about quality here, and we continue to work on it together.
I love that you're doing that throughout with your employees. It's so important to see what your impact is and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Any change in things like staff retention that you've tracked?
We do track staff retention. I don't think we've seen a direct correlation when it comes to RBT retention yet with our efforts on the ASDQ framework side. Clinician retention, we've seen significant improvements this year. We've had pretty stable retention, which is great. But that's something we continue to work on, because we know retention impacts quality and it impacts the client's experience. So it's something that we continue to, implement interventions, see how it changes, and figure out how do we improve retention across the company.
Are caregivers brought into the loop in any capacity on the ASDQ and kind of those conversations?
Good question. I believe we have a small summary in our handbook, but I don't think we are currently at the point where we're sharing out individual data. I know that's something we've talked about as a goal for this year, is to, publish more, whether that be through a journal or just, on LinkedIn publishing our data. But that is a goal, to get it in front of the caregivers more.
The BCBA is probably what our caregivers hear most. These are things like our organization find really important, like having regular caregiver meetings or caregiver trainings are important to us, or this is why we have to cover these sort of things. So there's reference to the fact that we have quality standards to our caregivers, because I hear them say it sometimes, or like they leave it in surveys or whatever. Like, I know that I have to do this because you guys say it's something that matters to you. So that's probably the extent we've gotten to yet. But yeah, Jess and I have talked a lot about wanting to put our data in front of all of our, whether it's our consumers or any like our staff members, even if they're not in other departments, they're not RBTs, they're maybe at our headquarters team or something like that, to get our information more out there.
But to reiterate what you said, they'll see their child's performance. Those clinical KPIs like targets met, short-term goals met, amount of parent training, auth utilization, all of those things, of course, they're talking about, but we're talking more like aggregate level across the
Absolutely.
And that's what I would love to get in front of them eventually.
And I imagine for a family who is selecting an organization, right, if they understood that you are looking at quality at this capacity at that level, they would choose to come to the place. They would want their child there because there's so much work being done at the entire organization level with the training, with the culture, the goodness of fit of your clinicians. I would want my child at a place like that.
Not the place.
Right. With so many levels of like accountability, like it can only be a good thing. So
when we were first just talking about the article, the Sublime Fatal article, and considering what the positive impact could be, that was a big part of our conversation. Was it doesn't just positively impact our staff members and our BCBAs and the clients receiving services, but also those families that are searching for services, so they determine whether or not they feel like they're a good fit for us as much as we feel like they are for us. It goes both ways. As well as things like graduate students selecting a practicum site and things like that. Understanding what we believe to be quality as an organization, and not just kind of, a generic, like, we deliver quality services. Well, like, what does that mean? And do you agree with our standards? Goes both ways. Employees, BCBA is looking for a place they want to work at. We want to be transparent.
I think that's a metric that everyone's looking for, right? Is like, have you worked here? Can someone give me their experience? Or do you have a child here? This would be a great measure to share with families, future employees, so on and so forth. Sorry.
I would imagine that some people who are listening to this will be very excited about the thought of working there. Do you have an apprenticeship program? Do you strictly grow your own RBTs into BCBAs, or do you take people who are maybe didn't work as an RBT for you, but are in that, needing their hours?
We do all of the above. So we recently rebranded our student program for the Behavior Analyst Student Academy. So we do take, I need people who maybe have started their practicum hours somewhere else and they want to jump over and finish them here, or they started as an RBT or a BT with us and then they're deciding to start a program. So all the above there. We also hire BCBAs who weren't RBTs with us as well. But we are in the process now of continuing to weave that ASDQ framework into the student program and elevate their experience as students. So by the time they get to be BCBAs with us, all of our standards are just kind of ingrained in what they do as BCBAs.
Yes. All right. So if you get inundated, you're welcome.
Good problem.
It's going to happen.
So you had mentioned before, if you want to for organizations who haven't started this but want to, Olivia, you said pick something and just start. Any other advice for getting rolling?
Read that article. That framework is game changer. It'll put all of it in perspective, starting with something small and focusing. And I think the alignment part of it is a huge part of like the pre-work before you roll out the system, which is the standards alignment, whether that be cultural alignment on like, hey, do me and my leaders, like, what have we talked about this? What do we all agree is important? Creating some internal standards. I mean, we have a full assessment of like, it's 100+ standard items on it, but you don't have to start there. It can be 5, it can be 10. Start somewhere that's manageable to you, because I think what we don't want people to walk away with is like, you can only do this if you're in the leadership at an organization. Like if you are a BCBA at an organization of 300 BCBAs, that doesn't mean that you couldn't start doing something like this just on your caseload, and bring it to your leaders and show them the article or talk about the framework that could happen. But start somewhere small that you can kind of control and manage, and pick it off and measure it. Start somewhere and measure it.
We have something on a smaller scale and, just with a single purpose that is kind of aligned in terms of our knowledge builder product. And I'm just coming from Calaba, where I was answering a lot of questions, and the people coming by the booth were frequently BCBAs. Sometimes they were RBTs. They're not decision makers, basically. So they're listening. They're like, hey, this sounds really good, but I'm not the decision maker. So in talking with them, I would kind of give them some talking points for when you're going to advocate for this. Here is how to talk to those decision makers. Do you have any tips for people like that align with what you're saying?
I was going to say what you said. I mean, so many of our ideas come from our staff. They come from our RBTs. It comes from our BCBAs. And we say that all the time. If you have an idea, let us know. Like they're in the field. We're a little bit removed from that face-to-face interaction. And a lot of the great ideas that we do come directly from them. So I would say, like you said, meet with your leadership team. Maybe show them that product that you talked to about at CentralReach, or an idea that you had, or even asking questions like, what clinical KPIs do we measure? Just understanding where your organization is at as a baseline might give them some thought starters on where they could potentially take it. I think if it were me in a small organization who didn't have anything done yet, I'd probably just start with my caseload, like Olivia said. Like, let's pick, treatment fidelity of my VIPs, create a quick TA for that, and then measure that across your clients when you're overlapping, or just start small and gathering that data point and then aggregating it. And it just starts to develop once you have data to look at and analyze. We have the tools as BCBAs. And I think sometimes we forget, like, we have all these tools that we use with our clients. We can do it to analyze like the aggregate behavior too, as well. It's the same process. It's the same science.
Yeah, I would throw something out there too, to not be very rigid in your ideas about what the visual display of your results needs to look like.
Yes. a Java standard article we might love, but or graph, but not everybody, you're not going to always be talking to another behavior analyst about these things too. Sometimes the way that it looks might be more consumable if it's a different color, if it's not a line graph, if it's a bar graph, things like that. We've played around with all that kind of stuff many times. Like, we have a lot of behavior analysts, but we have operators and we have other directors that are not BCBAs who want to contribute positively to our quality assurance, and, bringing them a multi-element design graph is not maybe going to be on the way that we want it to. So I totally agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And actually, because I was saying, I talked to a lot of customers who are inquiring about how to track quality in their organization. And a lot of the people I talk to are not behavior analysts, not clinical staff. They're just, owners or key stakeholders. So looking at how I'm sure that they want to. So it's I love that idea of looking at your own caseload, even starting there. And then you could bring that to the people that make those decisions.
And that's actually part of the article, is that whatever clinical KPIs that you select, that you are presenting it to across all leadership. So not just your chief clinical officer, but also your CEO, your CFO, your chief people officer. These data points that we're collecting need to be shared across everyone so they can understand the importance of balancing clinical quality and then financial health of the company and how they influence each other. The article goes really deep into that. And that has been a game changer for just getting the data in front of the entire leadership team, and just not just the clinical side.
100% agree with that, because so much of what we do, especially if your organization, well, I don't know. I was about to say if you're in a larger organization, but also maybe if you're in a smaller organization and you've got to make some very important financial decisions of where you're going to put your dollars, you want to know where the bang for the buck is. Yeah. How are you making these decisions that are actually dollar for dollar going to show up in your own wallet many times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let me do the final secret word, start. START. So let's just start, as Olivia said, pick a place and jump in there. Any final thoughts in terms of things that you've learned in the way for people who might be along the way, for people who might be just at the beginnings of this? that if you had known on the front end, maybe you would have done it differently, that sort of thing?
I would say it takes time for human behavior to change. And looking at aggregate levels of performance across a lot of adults, don't get discouraged if it takes a little while. If it takes a little longer than you think it's going to take, just keep tracking some sort of measurement on, is it getting a little better? A little bit better is something to celebrate. Small change is still change. I think we've tried to keep that at the center of our conversation from the moment we started picking up ASCQ as a framework. But it's a good reminder for us at, a group that has an entire framework. If you're just starting, I think it's the same piece of advice. Like, it's going to take time. It's okay. There's going to be people that might need a little bit more support than others. That's all right. That's to be expected.
Yeah, I agree. Time is the biggest resource that we don't have enough of within all of this. So, even not only the time for change, but the implementation of the system. I think, sometimes life gets in the way or something happens within the business that, maybe you have to, you had time blocked off to do your ASCQ assessment and then something happens, you have to push it, but just making sure that you continue to bring it back and prioritize it. So we are slowly continuing to move towards those incremental changes of improvement.
I seem to recall that you were saying that you are going to be presenting at conferences and such. Are there places where people can come and hear more from you?
Yes, we will be presenting at ABAI this year at the coveted time slot of Monday morning at 8 a.m.
Oh,
So if anyone wants to come see us there, we're actually going to be presenting on our scorecard system. So we have done 2 presentations in the past at ABAI on the ASDQ. So everything we're talking about now, but we are going to change it up a little this year. So we're excited for that.
I think one of our presentations might be online somewhere recorded. Can't remember if it was ABAI or if it was, we went to FABA, Florida Association for Behavior Analysts, a couple of years. So,
all right.
If you search our names, you'll probably find them. I don't know.
Well, I'll search your names and see what we find. We'll drop in any resources that we do find and anything else that you guys want to share out, then we're certainly welcome to do that. And I hope that you will start writing those articles and everything.
It's on our list for 2025.
It's got a journal somewhere.
I believe a journal is doing a call out for quality.
Perfect.
Yes. So I think it's due in September. Awesome. So we do have it marked off that we're going to get this done. Haven't started yet, but we will. We work very well under pressure. So.
Yes.
Well, you seem very organized, and I have no doubt that if you have set it as a goal, you've got some metrics to track your own progress, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Nissa, Allison, any final thoughts from you before we wrap up?
Not to put more work on your list, but would love those Italy recommendations. Not that I'm going, but maybe for Shannon, and then I'll join her.
I'm not joking. I will send them to you. I am very organized, if you can tell. I like to make a list. So I went with my siblings. They were like,
so fun.
They laissez-faire. They show up. They're like, where do we go? I'm like, I have an itinerary and a list of everything. So
you should just join us then. We're all going to Tuscany.
Yeah.
Come on down.
Yeah.
I'm just really glad that, when the call for nominations for Behavioral View came out, that I was able to nominate you guys, just because, like I said, I hear from customers a lot about tracking quality, and I just know that you've put a lot of hard work into this. So I think it'll be a really great resource and episode for a lot of my customers and beyond.
Thanks for thinking of us.
Well, thanks to all 3 of you and you as well, Nissa, for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun, very educational. And all right. So thanks everyone for joining us on the Behavioral View, and we will see you next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for the Behavioral View. Ready to lock in your CEU? Just follow the link below, complete the quiz, and enter the secret words. It's that easy. You've already done the work, so why not take the credit? Subscribe and join us for the next episode. We'll see you soon.